Jess Fiaschetti, welcome to Second Nature. Good to see you.
You as well. It's been too long.
This is like the dream team reunion right here. We
Seriously.
we all got to work together when I was at Red Bull, and I think you're probably still working with Red Bull. Dylan's obviously still at Red Bull, but we got to do so many cool projects together and like
Oh man.
build this crazy portfolio of awesome stuff. But I mean, everybody's gone on to do incredible stuff, and now we get to kind of dig back into it. This is gonna be super fun.
Well, maybe start there, Lucy. Talk about what you and Jess collaborated on when in your Red Bull tenure.
I don't even know where to start, but ultimately we worked with Outside PR on a lot of different Red Bull stuff, not just athlete marketing, but some of the events and otherwise. I've got to imagine probably one of the early stages was actually bringing you, Dylan, because a lot of the stuff we did with Outside PR was, of course, outside related, endurance sports and whatnot. And so having an ultra runner on the team was pretty handy and an easy starting point. So I've got to imagine maybe the Lost Coast project would have been one of the first few ones that we worked on. But my memory is a little foggy because it's been so long that we've been working together. Jess, do you remember where we started?
Yeah, so Outside PR started working with Red Bull in 2015. So it's been a hot minute, which has been an amazing,
Wow.
wild ride. We'll say, like, when the three of us all were there on the Red Bull side of things, that truly was like the golden days. I think that was an amazing period for Red Bull generally, but also, come on, we had the dream team together. So yeah, magic was going to happen. Lost Coast for sure was a memorable one. I think that was such an incredible project you guys put together to just showcase like Debo's insane talents and was just such a beautiful content creation, like sort of project that we got to work on. I mean, we've done everything. Like one of our first projects was Baylines, the slacklining competition in San Francisco.
That's right.
I also wanted to give like massive kudos to Debo because he actually took us on a 11-mile trail run with some press through like Mount Tam Valley area and totally kicked our asses, but kept like the good vibes going the whole. I mean, there was people dropping like flies and he wouldn't let anyone fall behind. So that was probably one of my first actual trail runs, even though I like lived in Whistler before and it sort of dabbled. That was by far the longest trail run I'd ever done and was like, God, I can't look like an idiot. I gotta keep
rad.
up, just keep going. It was so rad.
That was probably like 2015, 2016 timeframe.
It was
from memory, you had
days.
A big group of journalists who were all spending the night up at West Point Inn on Mount Tamalpais.
Yeah.
So I shuttled you guys up there on foot. And then as soon as you guys settled in, I jumped on jumped back on the trail and ran all the way home.
You just ran back down, just an easy 22-mile day.
That's back when we were all much younger, and those types of days are a lot harder for me. But Jess, we will have provided a sort of a thorough introduction to you in the intro of the podcast, but I think it'd be great just to set the foundation of who you are, what you do, what Outside PR does, because as you probably know at this point, we sort of are trying to focus on the business of the outdoor industry. And that's sort of the space that you guys operate within at a super high level. So maybe just start there. Who are you? What is Outside PR? What do you specialize in?
Yeah, you got it. So my name is Jess Fiaschetti. I'm the president of Outside PR. We're a boutique active lifestyle agency. We're really founded in the endurance space. So my business partner, Gordon Wright, founded the company in I wouldn't say 2000. It wasn't. It was 1995. We're going back. So we'll be, 30 years next year. And he really started in, like I said, that endurance space. He has a real passion for ultra races, sort of adventure sports. And it started with like Primal Quest and some of those old school, super gnarly races. And then we sort of expanded into more of that core outdoor space. We were working with brands like Pearl Izumi and Sunto, and now we really see ourselves as a consumer agency that focuses on active lifestyle. So we've expanded outside of just the core outdoors, and while we still, focus on run, bike, ski as sort of our mainstays, we're also in action sports, food and beverage, hospitality, travel, even in fashion to some extent. So definitely expanded out. I think the outdoors industry is now so important in all categories and demographics of businesses and of everyday life. So you'll see brands, coming to us wanting to break into or outside of the outdoors industry.
That's really interesting. I want to hear more about that here in a second, but without burying the lead, you guys made a big announcement yesterday. This was totally unplanned, you coming on the podcast right when you had big news to share. So maybe let's talk about that first and then go back to what you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit of a believer in fate. This is definitely serendipitous that you guys reached out and wanted to chat. I've been waiting for this call for a long time. So the timing just lined up really nicely because yesterday we announced that we're opening our first global office in my hometown of Sydney, Australia. We found an incredible gal. And like I said, maybe it was fate, but she kind of landed in our laps at the right time. I've been building this idea and concept of wanting to have and establish a presence in the, pretty amazing and super outdoorsy Australia, New Zealand market. And then when we connected with this gal who was, really interested in working with us and was open to sort of shepherding, this next phase for the company and really leading operations in Australia, New Zealand, it just made sense. So we're thrilled to offer services now in both North America, Australia, New Zealand for organizations and brands wanting to get into and sort of position themselves in both.
What does it mean to have somebody in that area? Because I don't know, from my perspective, it seems like the internet is a global reach no matter what you're talking about. And so many of these brands are globally. So do you see it more as like we're going to be reaching more people in New Zealand and Australia through on the ground efforts? Or do you see it more as we're going to be working with more localized brands in those regions? Like what is kind of your focus or your thought on what that expansion actually means?
Kind of both. And it's interesting you bring that up because it feels like we're sort of a globally connected community. However, regionalization is so important because your IP address and what shows up on your interwebs on a daily basis is actually going to be really different regionally and geographically to where you are. Oftentimes, our brands do not show up in search results in the Australian market. They don't know a lot about some of the key, happenings in this part of the world. So even though we think we sort of spread our wings globally, it's actually a lot of opportunity to really storytell on the ground. Australia, New Zealand's like a burgeoning sort of community and industry for the outdoors as well. Some incredible brands coming out of there. Breaking into the US is really hard. So having someone committed to and dedicated to that sort of transition has been really important. Having someone on the ground to give us perspective on what's happening in Australia and New Zealand is also sort of essential and kind of critical to the success of brands going either direction. And then you have to remember too that our seasons are quite the opposite. So when we're announcing, a summer footwear launch here in the US, they're about to kick into ski season. So we have to talk about, the goggles and, ski hardware and, destination, travel for resorts. So you're on a totally different time frame as well. So it's important to have someone on the ground who can really speak to that too.
Building on that a little bit, Jess, it strikes me, and something we've talked about on the podcast a number of times, is one of the best ways that brands can achieve growth goals is to expand to new geographies. You just mentioned that breaking into the North American market is particularly hard. At the same time, we've talked a lot about North American brands breaking into Asian markets, for example. Maybe speak a little bit about what those challenges are and how PR is valuable for brands who are trying to do that, whether it's breaking into the North American market, the Asian market, the Australian market, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, like I mentioned, beyond seasonality is just an understanding of the landscape. Every nation, every sort of community functions a little bit differently in how they perceive marketing, PR, brand positioning, what's important to that community. So you really actually have to know sort of the basis of the community, how they connect, how they communicate, what's working, what's not. So competitive landscapes are really important to take a look at when you're trying to enter a market. Sort of the saturation, is there gaps in the market? Can you find a niche for yourself that you can really carve out? And so it is kind of critical to understand just what the culture is in each location as well, because it is going to differ significantly when you have a nation as big as the US. You're going up against that many more competitors. Australia is just a fraction of the size. I think, to be honest, the population is smaller than California, which is wild to think about. However, they obviously punch above their weight, as we've seen in the Olympics and we've seen, across all sporting disciplines. Australians are just generally sports oriented and very, very outdoorsy. So we're seeing a lot more brands and organizations supporting that. But that conversation is different. We almost speak a little differently too. I feel like my whole Australian vernacular is definitely mellowed over the years, but you speak to an Aussie and they have very different ways of presenting things and of understanding how to sort of contextualize things. So it's even as like granular as that how you speak to your community is essential to understand. You don't want to go in all hot and heavy in a particular direction if that's not going to be received well. So even understanding just how communities receive communication is super important.
Really interesting. And communication is really at the core of what your career is focused on. And, from my perspective, you can correct me if I'm wrong, having never worked in public relations myself, you're really in the connections business, the communications business, the reputation business. So maybe like starting from a foundational level of like, why is outside PR? What sort of value are you delivering to your partners? I know you can't speaking about this generically might be difficult. You probably provide very individualized services for all the clients that you work at, but fundamentally, is it about connection, communication, reputation building?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question because at the base level, public relations is about communication, but there's a reason the word relations is in there. Relationship building, fostering authentic relationships between your clients, between your press, or any of your key stakeholders is absolutely essential to how your brand or organization is going to be perceived. It's really thinking critically from sort of a 30,000 foot view of what communities, demographics, key markets, innovations are going to be most open to connecting with your brand. So PR does so many things. We are the protector of the brand's position. We're the protector of the brand's DNA. We have to ensure that they're being presented and positioned correctly. We do crisis communications and that sort of coattails on that side of things of brand protection. But in the same breath, our other key stakeholders are the press, and we want to be providing, the most easy access and up-to-date materials and connection to our brand as possible, because that's what allows our brand to reach those really essential, new consumers or to protect the core of who that brand is. So yeah, so many different things that PR does. We function, in the sales department, in the marketing department, in the growth department, operations. So we sort of are like the conduit between all of these different departments within a brand's, DNA and core in order to make sure that, the right demographic and audience is reached.
That's incredible. There's so many different elements that you're involved in, so many different levers that you can kind of pull with all these different brands. And surely each one kind of has their own, special needs that they want to go after when it comes to building out what their brand stands for and how they're represented in the media. When it comes to the actual business of outside PR, is there sort of like a secret sauce, or is there something that really makes outside PR stand apart from the other cohorts, or are there other agencies that are out there? Is there something that you offer? I feel like one of the things I see a lot of media people go after is more of the influencer side of things, and it seems like outside is a lot more brand focused, able to activate athletes and influencers, but it doesn't seem like you've gone all the way in where a lot of other agencies have. But I'd be curious what your take is on that.
No, it's such a great question because the evolution of what PR agencies mean and do has changed so significantly over the last 10 years that I've been working at Outside PR that it's night and day what's available to brands now. You can align with an influencer agency, a social media agency, SEO and paid marketing agency. But what's really important to us has been that authentic relationship. So that's something that we've never, ever compromised on. And I think you find now that with a lot more paid opportunities and with influencers that do one and done deals with, brands or organizations, that authentic relationship just sort of falls by the wayside. So that's maybe part of the reason we haven't really dove into the influencer side beyond what we do for our existing clients. We do help build and vet not athlete programs, but influencer programs. Athlete programs are usually always done internally at the brand, though we do help vet, the diversity and help, think about different opportunities for our clients as well. But on the influencer side, we're certainly doing more of those longer term established relationships versus one-off, because we see so much more ROI and benefit in working long term. that sort of applies to our relationship to our clients as well. And that might be another big differentiator, is we're really known for long-term established relationships. For instance, we've been working with Cotopaxi for 10 years. So I started Outside PR in March of 2014. We signed Cotopaxi in April of 2014, and we're still their primary agency of record. And we're so proud to have seen the growth and worked with them to basically grow along the way and help build who this incredible brand is. But we've worked with HOKA since 2018. We've really pride ourselves and work towards long-term relationships. And I'd say the other thing that really differentiates us in this outdoor space is that we come from a big agency mindset. So, Gordon came from a large agency, advertising, marketing, and PR when he started, and, left to start Outside PR, and maintained those relationships, those contacts, and instilled that culture in all of our employees up until now, in terms of thinking big, reaching high, creating relationships in a top tier media space, so that we're not only proficient in the core and are talking to outlets like Gear Junkie and Runner's World and Outside and those super important outdoor centric publications, but in the same breath, we're talking to Wall Street Journal and Fast Company and New York Times, and making sure that our clients are reaching the upper echelons in media, staying true to their core and speaking to those key publications. But it depends on what every brand wants. Some have very specific purviews and directions. So there is no one size fits all when it comes to PR for us. We are extremely curated. We're very strategic and specific. So I think there's a few components, but I think our team is, I think the last thing I'll say that maybe differentiates us is our team truly lives who Outside PR is. Everyone on the team is either an environmentalist, an outdoor advocate, diversity and DEI advocate, a runner, a skier, a climber, through hiking. Like we really live and breathe what our clients are and who they are. So that's another, I think, essential part to really having a passionate team that will help support the work that we do.
Okay, so then 2 comments and a question. Number 1, Lutzi, that reminds me of the conversations we've had about the importance of being a practitioner when you're operating in this space, actually being somebody who participates in these sports. The second comment, the first time I ever heard of Cotopaxi was on that run that we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. You were wearing a Cotopaxi jacket. I was like, what is this brand? And that was, again, back in like 2015. And what an incredible story of, growth and execution from that brand. My question, building on this concept of building long-term relationships, this is sort of a nuts and bolts of the operation at Outside PR. From what I've heard, what makes the agency business difficult is that oftentimes you have too much work, and then you have to sort of scale up the team to, be able to satisfy that workload. And then, for some agencies, who don't have these long-term relationships, you then lose that work, and then you have to scale down the operation. So you're constantly sort of toggling both the team, the workload, and sort of the sales and customer relations inherent in managing relationships with your clients. Anything you can say about how to build successful long-term relationships? Because my guess is that adds a level of equilibrium to the operation at Outside PR that probably helps from a day-to-day operations perspective. Obviously, you're the president of the agency, and so building those long-term relationships are probably not only good for business, but also probably good for your stress levels and the happiness and satisfaction of the employee base.
Yeah, and honestly, it sounds like common sense, but communication and trust are at the core of what we do, and those kind of long-term relationships that applies to our clients, to our team, to the media, but really understanding who the client is, creating that trust, fostering that relationship. That's, I think, what is at the core of it. Then after that, it's constantly producing. So it's making sure that we're always thinking about innovations and next steps and looking high level, looking long term. We're not just that short term sort of PR. We're not going to do a PR stunt and then hope for the best, or the other sort of way that we like to phrase it is throwing darts into a dark room. I think a lot of PR agencies are accused of doing something like that. It's just that scattergun approach where it just reach as many people as possible, but your reputation's on the line after that. You really don't do your client any services by just trying to get, as fast and furious out there with any kind of news. So truly strategy is really important as well, because it shows that we understand who the client is, what they're trying to achieve, who they're trying to reach, the position that we want to find ourselves in, the leadership opportunities that we want to place for them. And so thoughtfulness, and that's a grind. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like agency life is such a hustle. Like you said, we're thinking new business, staffing, turnover, retention, all the things that internally are so important to our team, because culture at Outside PR is primary. We're a people-centric agency, which is, I think, why those longer-term relationships with our clients are a lot more natural, because we ensure a really good work-life balance with our team. We really, encourage them to make that connection early on and authentically. And I'm not afraid to move people around in the agency if we feel like it's not a good fit for the team. If someone's, it's not necessarily not performing because our team is incredible, but we maybe find that the relationship isn't as, natural as it could be somewhere else. And we'll make a shuffle, because you do need to have an account team that you really trust from the client side. So that's definitely like paramount in the success of a long-term relationship.
I feel like so much of trust is also based when you deliver on expectations, and of course setting the right expectations. But you mentioned earlier, you're talking about kind of like the ROI, and when it comes to either pitching a new client and showing the value, or speaking to an existing client and really showing them what that ROI is, surely things have kind of changed over the years with now view counts maybe matter, maybe they don't. What are the things that you most typically, communicate to your clients when it comes to the return on their investment of, keeping you on on board or whatever? How do you talk about the return on investment with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, automatically I can say that your return on investment for PR is exponentially higher than any other lever you can pull in the communications field. It just is. That earned media is absolutely essential. There's nothing that can compare like a paid full page ad in a magazine to a full page feature on a brand or a thought leader in the space. So immediately if you see, an earned media piece, that fosters trust in your audience. So the ROI is just there immediately and optically from that sort of connection. And then I'd say we have, just on more of a tactical level, we have case studies to sort of showcase, what we've been able to produce. At a granular level, we're using things like hits, number of hits, impressions, ad value. So those are things that are really important, especially to very data-driven organizations. They really want to show their key stakeholders, what is able to be achieved and what the results are. But PR is one of the hardest sort of disciplines to quantify. And it's always been a little bit of a pain point, I think, for some people. But people that understand PR understand that it's not just about hitting the numbers, though that's extremely important. Obviously, we need to be able to show our work. Often it's more about brand awareness and making sure that, we're popping up in best of guides and buyer's guides and, holiday gifting lists. But we're also top of mind when it comes to, thought leaders in the space or athletes who are achieving incredible things. And you're seeing that logo when someone's, free soloing El Cap or, surfing, Chopu. So there's a lot to be said for just general brand awareness that you cannot put a number on, but there's an understanding that that's incredibly important to people's awareness of the brand.
It's our conversation about brand marketing versus performance marketing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like quality versus quantity. I remember my favorite way to calculate this, which I've got to imagine is not the way you do it now or maybe ever, but how we used to do it in internal documents. We would pull, say it was like a magazine or whatever, we would pull the rate of how much it costs to run a full page ad. And then we would take that number and multiply it by the number of pages and be like, haha, this was $100,000, value or whatever. I doubt that's probably how it's done now, but
I think it still is. That's definitely still one thing that we have to showcase. Yeah, that's just a good proof point to show it is very hard to put a value on PR because there's no real sort of sum for it. So we do a number of different things in reporting. I could give a shout out to our amazing account coordinator team because they're the ones, day in, day out, tracking these hits, sourcing them, trying to find, where the brands are popping up, quantifying them. We're digging into market share of voice, different ways to showcase our brand awareness. And that really depends on what the client is looking for. We're using a lot of that Google Analytics. We can jump into the back end of a lot of platforms for a number of our clients to see, where numbers are kicking up in terms of click-throughs and things like that. I'd say affiliate marketing has become an essential part of our sort of purview as well. We just added that as a capability earlier this year, and our affiliate director has done an incredible job of sort of building that program, making sure that that is something that a lot of publishing houses will not even consider coverage without these days. So it is something that, although is a little bit in opposition to earned media, is actually intrinsically tied to it now.
I saw this happen at Aura all the time, where they wouldn't publish a review of the ring unless they had some sort of affiliate backend on their media platform, because they were getting millions of views and they're giving a review to this thing and they want to have a little piece of the action. Basically, it was I definitely scratched my head a little bit on it of like, wait, where is the credibility here? Like, this is actually just like an ad.
Well, it took us a little while to get used to that for sure. But I'd say, with advertising dollars dropping so significantly over the past number of years, it's totally understandable that publishing houses need another revenue stream. And this is a good way to do it. And I would say there's still a level of sort of trust and authenticity there too, because most brands need to have an affiliate link. So while some have not managed to get on that train yet, I would say the majority are already making that switch and incorporating that into their sort of, daily work. And thus, you've got sort of a coverage of all of the top brands that would be considered for that kind of publication already being part of that testing sort of period.
This feels like a good time to talk about maybe how things have changed during your tenure in the business and your tenure at OutsidePR, because obviously we have seen a massive revolution in the way people are consuming media and therefore the ways in which brands are engaging consumers. Obviously, when you probably came into the business, having something featured in the Wall Street Journal was massively impactful. And now, being featured on a YouTube channel might be as valuable or more so. So maybe talk about that evolution from legacy media to new digital media and how Outside has helped brands be successful in that revolution.
Yeah, well, you called it already. It's that movement to non-traditional media that we see is probably one of the primary changes over the last 10 years or so. Not to say that print piece has really gone down in value. I'll be honest, with the changes in print and sort of decrease in numbers of print publications, it's almost as if the value has gone up because they're a lot harder to place. They're a lot longer lead. And those are still very prestigious to land. Especially in things like Outside Buyer's Guide. They've really changed their sort of testing processes, which has been nice to see and sort of adapt to the new way of thinking for consumers. But absolutely cannot sleep on new media. So yeah, YouTube, social media, other sort of platforms like that, we're definitely more engaged in that arena than we ever had been before. I'm embarrassed to say I don't have TikTok, and that's maybe held me back. But thank God my team are all full of Gen Zers who are extremely proficient in that field and can just tell me what's going on in the space. So, it is really important to still think about how we can engage with TikTok and some of these other platforms, because that new young generation of outdoors enthusiasts are all over it. They may not be subscribing to some of these awesome publications anymore, but as we saw in the New York Times last month, or maybe a little bit earlier than that, sort of those coffee table book glossy print magazines in the core outdoor space, Mountain Gazette and RE and Field Mag and Adventure Journal, they're all coming back with a force. And I love that, because I think there's something to be said for actually having a bag in your hands and being able to see your product or your brand featured there. So I would say, I love people who say print is dead. I don't agree with that at all. I do think there is something to be said, though, for having a really good balance and understanding of where your demographic is consuming media. And for one brand to the next, it's going to be different. So you really have to have a very curated approach to media.
That's our favorite hobby horse, isn't it, Lutzi?
You're speaking Dylan's language right here. You know what I think it really actually boils down to is that maybe print media in the past wasn't as thoughtful in their approach to putting stuff out. So you saw a lot of magazines that were just like ads and not highly considered content. And now, because there's been this sort of culling, the most important and thoughtful pieces of content like Mountain Gazette, like Surfer's Journal, where they really placed a premium on the look and feel, the stories being written, the content inside. Look at you guys.
We're both holding up our Artful print magazines here.
Yeah, shout out to Rogi and to Kate Critchko for these. It's Steve Casimiro. God, you guys I love that this is still happening and it's getting even more common these days, because it's just a beautiful thing to have a magazine like that and really diversify, the media space. But Lucy, I think you're probably right. I mean, there was just a lot more options back in the day. Like print was our mainstay, and that's really what we aspired to have, and we still do. But it's different, just how quickly the media landscape has changed. The, acquisition of so many publishing houses and the mergers and, unfortunately, mass layoffs in media have really affected. So is the algorithm. So there's so many different areas that are impacting how we can show up and who we're working with. And, one thing just wanted to touch on the layoff side is we've seen just the unfortunate turnover of some absolutely incredible journalists over the last number of years, just given everything that happened after COVID. And like I said, some of these mergers and acquisitions on the publishing side. And such a shame, because there's so much talent that was being fostered and really starting to come up the ranks in these incredible publications, and just, now so much uncertainty. So, our hope, because our journalists are our friends and the reason why we can do what we do. And so we really value, that they're working on things that they're so passionate about and that we can continue supporting their work, is that there's going to be more of these independent players crop up and opportunities for people to lean into where they're passionate and not just have to sort of follow the man.
I have a question on that, but Lucy, do you want to finish your thought? It felt like we interrupted you when we were holding up our magazines.
I think you both made my point beautifully.
Cool. All right. So then my question, building off, having the relationships with the journalists, just sort of like a practical personal curiosity question here. Like, I would imagine that in certain situations, your clients are like, hey, we really want to tell this story. Can you reach out to your network and help us find the right place to tell this brand story or product story? Similarly, I imagine that your friends that work in publishing are like, hey, we're working on a story about this particular sport, this particular niche in the outdoor industry. Do you have somebody on the brand side or on the athlete side in your network who we can feature? Maybe if you can just speak a little bit about those two things, about like, obviously you are in the relationships business, both the relationships with the brands and the relationships with the media and with the publishers. And like, practically, how does it look in terms of like where ideas are coming from? Or is it coming from the journalists more often, or is it coming from the clients more often?
That's a good question. Can I say it's coming from your PR person?
Yes.
A lot of the time, that's our job. We're coming up. We're given a challenge or a campaign or an opportunity or a lead or a crumb of an idea. How do we distill that into something that is media worthy? And that's what our job is, to actually take something that may be relatively dry or is newsworthy, but we're not sure we can really position it correctly in the space that our client wants it, and turn it into something absolutely magical. And then on the other side, yes, journalists are reaching out to us all the time. They've either been put on assignment, they've come up with something amazing themselves, they've pitched that to an editor, got it approved, or they are just like concepting something and want to see if it has legs. So it's definitely a mix. I wouldn't say it's more so from either side, but we're given an opportunity from our client to think critically about how to position, either a product launch, some brand news, something along those lines. And we need to do it really thoughtfully. We usually spend a lot of time curating what that concept is going to be, researching the right journalist for it. Like I said, we don't like sort of the spray approach of just trying to get the news out as far and wide as possible. That is the case when it comes to press releases. It's up on the wire, we're sending it out to key media, but press releases are more sort of a generalized approach. When it comes to those curated stories, there's a lot of research going on the back end.
Interesting and good to know. So one thing that I was curious about is, because we are focused on the outdoor industry, to me, it feels like an outdoor consumer is a unique consumer, and that is probably reflected in your job, in your career, in your day-to-day responsibilities. So if there's anything you can share about what representing outdoor brands, like what makes PR in the outdoor industry different from other industries or other sectors? Is there anything there that I'm touching on that, the consumer is unique in our space and therefore it requires, a unique messaging, a unique touch?
Oh yeah, it's just way more fun. We're known to be the fun industry. This is why we do what we do, because everything that we get to storytell around helps us get outside, get in nature, reconnect. It's all about supporting physical, mental, emotional health. So we try to keep reminding our brands that when we're pushing something, this is all about making sure that the outdoor industry becomes more diverse, more inclusive, more accessible, and more appealing. So I would say, yeah, compared to any other industry, it's got to be the most fun and attracts the most interesting, cool, different people. There's not a singular personality in the outdoors, which is really nice. Every discipline is different. Every approach is different. And so, yeah, we're all it's very unique because it's all individual.
I'd love to know more about how you personally got into this. How did you get your start, and what was sort of the first domino to fall in this whole thing? I mean, now you're president of this giant outside PR firm that's amazing and
we're
works with all
still
these incredible
boutique, but that's
clients.
lovely.
But I mean, what was the first thing that really pulled you into this world? What was the moment?
Lucy's a big hero's journey guy, so this is the call to adventure part of the conversation here.
That's
wonderful.
Right.
I love it. Well, as every Aussie tends to do, I took a gap year after school and found my way to Whistler because, that's the second largest population of Aussies outside Australia. There or London, I'm not sure. But found my way to Whistler, ended up in an amazing job working as I was the communications manager for the World Ski and Snowboard Festival. So I sort of started my PR life with WSSF. So we had, it was an incredible 10-day festival. We had, the Iraj Masters and the West Beach Classic, the Big Air. I mean, it's where I got to sort of cut my teeth in the ski industry and meet, every athlete that's gone through the Olympics and has really, represented North America and Europe in skiing and snowboarding was there. It was an amazing experience. And I was there for about 4 years. After 8 years living in Whistler, I think I needed a little change from ski industry and from resort living and found my way to San Francisco. Did not know a single person. Truly just fell in love with that city and ended up staying on. And when I moved there, the one person I knew in the area in Northern California was Megan Michelson, who at the time worked for ESPN. She's now, I think, with Outside and is a freelancer and just an incredible journalist and someone I very much look up to and sort of aspire to be. And I contacted her and said, Megan, who do I reach out to in the PR world? What are the agencies you love? What are the organizations I should connect with? And first and only one she said was Gordon Wright at Outside PR. So I hit him up cold and said, I'm this half Canadian, half Aussie semi dirtbag moving to the States. Don't know anything about your industry here. I met a few of your journalists, but I really don't know this space. I was very well versed in Canadian media, but the US was a whole different ballgame. And he gave me a chance and offered me a job. I actually took another job the same day and turned down Gordon. So I went to work at an experiential marketing agency for 8 months until the entire marketing team was dissolved, and then went back with my tail between my legs to Gordon, and he gave me a job again. So
what a legend.
Here I am.
Maybe we could talk about Gordon a little bit here too, because as you mentioned, he's the founder of OutsidePR.
Yeah.
And I've actually been talking to him a bit recently. I don't know if he's mentioned this to you, but he's working on a cool project. We probably shouldn't talk about that. This is one of those.
Yeah, that's under embargo. Let's keep that under wraps. But
we won't talk about that. But he's a special guy, and he obviously saw something special in you too. And of course, you have been what I would interpret as promoted to being the president of the organization. So maybe say a few words about, how Gordon has been a mentor for you, and if I'm right in that interpretation, and that, you're sort of taking the leadership role over now as he, I don't know, maybe is transitioning in his career.
Yeah. You're going to make me teary thinking about it, because Gordon's just an absolute bloody legend. Truly, godfather of the outdoor PR industry. Like really, I think he's mentored a lot of people throughout his career, and that's what's so special about him is he still connects with and stays in touch with people he met, 20 years ago and sort of followed their careers or helped them initially. And he has a very, very good ability at connecting and creating these amazing relationships. Yeah, Gord's absolutely been a mentor to me. He taught me the ropes in this industry. I came from the outside. I did not have the connections. I did not have, while I'd been working in the industry and obviously came from a PR background, honestly, Canada is quite different to the States. This was definitely, big fish time, and I was not quite ready for it. So he gave me the space and the training and support. And, I think we have a similar sort of hustle culture mentality. So I just slotted right into the outside PR way of life and felt really comfortable there. From day one, I just absolutely adored our team, our clients, and sort of started moving my way up. I think, that kind of kinship with Gordon sort of naturally lent itself to me sort of climbing the ranks, at the agency and ending up in a VP position in sort of 2020. And then in 2022 was appointed as president as Gordon starts to think about his next journey, which, I don't think I can share too much information on that except for, he's built something incredible. This is his legacy. Outside PR is something he doesn't want to see go away or die. And so my hope is to be able to sort of take that forward and continue doing the incredible work that he has, started everything out with.
Very, very cool.
He's definitely found a capable set of hands. I mean, the work that you've done and the stuff that Dylan and I've gotten a chance to experience and everything that we've seen come out of Outside PR is truly incredible. What kind of advice would you give to that next generation now that you're in that mentorship role? A lot of people listening to this are, wanting to get into the outdoor industry, are interested in careers or finding their way along this path. What are the bits of advice that you would kind of share to someone who maybe is just starting that journey, who just made their way to the San Francisco, as it were, to like start calling around and making moves?
Yeah, that's a good question because there's so many different resources now that I don't think I had any awareness of when I started out here. I definitely felt like I was kind of on an island, and thank God for Gordon and for the whole team at Outside PR because I think I'd still be floating otherwise. Couple of actual sort of tactical resources. Basecamp on Facebook. So Basecamp Outdoor Jobs is run by Jenna Selmer and Ali, and they do an incredible job of pulling together some of the best, outdoor opportunities. And I'd say just jump on there, make a connection, join that community, start to learn from, the conversation that's going on there. And the other part I would say is volunteer your time. If you're interested in, whether it's PR, any other component of the outdoors industry, take on internships, start to learn the ropes and understand the sort of key players in this space. Trade shows used to be a place that, we could really lean on for those kind of connections as well. And unfortunately, things have changed significantly over the last number of years. But there's a few that are cropping up that I would say be worth looking into. Like TRE has their switchback, sort of more outdoors centric component to it.
You guys work on that, don't you? I remember
well, we
seeing
don't
Gordon
represent
there.
them. Yeah. So Gordon was there last year. They actually, Gordon and then my other teammate Spencer were the ones that coordinated the live streaming for the event, which is just such a wonderful way to connect with a much wider audience not able to make it down to Austin. And TR is sort of a critical component to the running industry. To see it sort of develop now into welcoming more outdoor brands is a great way, I think, for people to sort of see the up and coming brands and different, organizations they might want to align with. I think connecting, it sounds easy, but connecting on LinkedIn, looking into your brands, just doing that outreach and sort of seeing if someone will be available for informational interviews. I do dozens of those, connecting with, recent graduates or people trying to break into the outdoors and just help them understand, what direction they want to go into. And looking at the different jobs that are available. So, PR might not be your thing, but there's certainly other areas in the communications field that might be more up your alley. So just doing a lot of research. I think brands are getting really creative in how they have job offerings now across sort of the whole Marcom discipline and creative opportunities, in all areas. So following brands that you love, look into Red Bull, look into HOKA. What if they got on, even if they don't have any open positions, it's always worth applying, even as just do an open application. We have that on our Outside PR website. You can just apply. We may not have something open at that time, but it's a good way for us to see your resume, connect with amazing talent, keep you in mind if there's something that comes up. So, and then talk to other people that you respect in the industry, find out what the culture is at organizations that you want, and ask the tough questions, because you really want to know if you're going to, find a happy place for yourself.
I have a couple more questions before we wind down. One that just popped into my head here is, as social media has exploded, it's allowed brands to go direct in a way that wasn't possible prior to the digital era. And you, as a communications professional, probably have a unique insight as to when it's best for a brand or one of your clients to go direct, maybe make a piece of their own content rather than go through a traditional publisher or one of these new age digital media enterprises. Any comments on that?
The content creation side of things isn't necessarily what we do, so it's not kind of something that we oversee so much. However, what I'd say for brands looking to do that is make sure that you have the quality of content and the talent to actually make that worthwhile. You really don't want to slip up in terms of your brand positioning. So I would just say that it has to remain authentic to the brand if they're going to choose to go that direction.
Okay, so then maybe a better question would be, we mentioned Cotopaxi. This is a brand that we've never talked about on the show here. And you, having been the agency of record for one of the fastest growing outdoor brands for the last decade, probably puts you in a position to comment on what they have done very well from a consumer engagement perspective, from a communications perspective, that's allowed them to be so successful in the marketplace.
Yeah, they're kind of a unicorn in space, honestly, in some respects. And I think they're a really good standard and benchmark to set for a lot of other brands. They really walk the talk. So as, a B Corp and a impact-driven brand, they're the first VC-founded benefit corporation in North America. So it sort of sets the bar already about who they are, and ensuring that is like core to their DNA. That business model is really interesting. There's an argument and a thought that, maybe all impact businesses should have a foundation intrinsically tied to them, and that should be part of their purview. And so they sort of set that conversation in motion. And I think that helped people understand a little bit more about what it means to give back and for corporate responsibility to be primary when you think about creating a new concept or a new brand. So that's one really interesting way to connect with the consumer is tie it back to philanthropy. And then, they were also one of the first brands, or maybe the first brand, to launch with dead stock materials. So even using sustainable circularity materials that weren't really common 10 years ago or weren't talked about to that degree. And that's still part of their, a massive part of their product offerings is their Del Dia collection made out of dead stock. So really surfacing the importance of thinking, strategically and thoughtfully around product curation and sustainability at like the foundational level. And then a community for them as well. So connecting through their Questival event series, which they've now pivoted to do for universities, but they still do a lot of community-driven events and a weaving culture more and more into their sort of business model as well. So I think they've done a really good job in sort of pillars of like product, impact, and then brand and culture to really make sure across all levels you're connecting with the consumer to help them think better about giving back and doing good, which is basically their mantra.
Such an interesting brand. Lucy, anything else for Jess before we get to BPC?
Let's drop in on BPC.
All right, Jess. So we gave you this prompt before we got on, but we finish every show with this closing segment, brand product content, where we share something that we noticed that's relevant to brands, products, or content in the outdoor industry. So you get us started here to close the episode down.
All righty. What I've noticed has just been the most important thing that's come up over the last year or so is brands reconnecting with their core. I think a lot of brands in the outdoor industry started to sort of lose their way in some essence, going after a key demographic that they'd identified that meant that they took a little bit of a left turn when it came to their actual core outdoors, centric focus. And we are seeing an absolute 180 on that one, where brands are coming back to the core, starting to re-engage with the outdoors industry, get back to those endemic spaces, really speak to that consumer and the base level and welcome them back into the community. And I think there is so much to be said for actually recognizing when you've gone a little too far in the wrong direction, or not even the wrong direction, but a different direction in terms of connecting with a community, to recognize that you need to come back to the base and start, fostering and protecting that core again.
Awesome. Lutzi, you want to go next?
Sure. I've got a brand today. So this is actually not an outdoor brand, but I think the lesson here is very cool. There's a brand by the name of Fang, and they make tomboy gear is maybe like the best way to describe what they do. And it's two ex-Nike employees who left and started this brand 12 years ago. And in their original pitch deck, they had kind of a mood board of like who inspired them and their style and everything. And Debbie Harry, the lead singer of Blondie, was one of the style icons in that mood board. And this past week, Fang debuted a collection with Debbie Harry 12 years after that original mood board dropped. And one of my favorite quotes has always been, people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 5. And this is a perfect example of a brand that started out with a vision of where they wanted to go, and they patiently just kept stacking brick by brick by brick. And 12 years is not a short amount. That's a long time to continue stacking and doing, good collaboration after another to get to this like peak moment of connecting to one of their original ideas. So Fang, Debbie Harry collection, it looks incredible. And I'm just celebrating the fact that this brand actually made it happen. Such a cool moment for them.
Portland based, right?
That's right.
Like a lot of cool brands. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll close us down here. I had a different one, but it feels appropriate for me to change to a content piece with Davis Smith, the founder of Cotopaxi. Since Jess is here, it reminded me of the 2 episodes that he's done on how I built this. And I feel like I've used how I built this as my BPC on, a critical mass of our episodes. But the first one details just the founding story of Cotopaxi. Really, really incredible stuff that echoes a lot of what Jess said that makes them special and unique and so successful in the outdoor marketplace. But the second one that they did, I think around May of 2023, was when Davis Smith stepped down as the CEO of Cotopaxi because he is a member of the Mormon Church. He's a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints. And he was called by his religious community to go serve as the mission president in a community in Brazil. Of course, he had already done a mission in South America, which is part of the Cotopaxi founding story that you guys can go listen to. But I thought an incredible just display of commitment to your values. He stepped down as the CEO of the company that he built from the ground up, handed over to the reins to the new CEO, a guy named Damian Wang, I think is his last name, but a very competent operator too, who's been able to keep the momentum going. He's probably halfway through that service, but it's a really interesting podcast with Guy Raz where Davis Smith just talks about, the honor he felt was bestowed upon him to, from my perspective, it's hard to think about, okay, stepping down from this business when it's like on this rocket ship trajectory and you feel like, probably the biggest contributing factor to its success to then go, serve the community that, has been so integral to his life. It's, I don't know, a really interesting story. And I think makes Cotopaxi differentiated in a lot of different ways. And he has such a unique way of communicating the value of, living the values of your brand more or less. And so that would be my content recommendation. We'll link to both of those in the show notes of today's episode. Well, what an awesome primer on PR. Jess, you did such a good job in educating Lutzi and I. I'm sure our audience will really appreciate it. Hopefully this will be the first of many. Thanks for coming on Second Nature.
I'm so too. Thanks, guys.
We made it the whole time without a no comment.
Yes.
I know I thought about it, but then I was like, you know what? Just divulge. It's fine.
Victory.
Yeah, tip of the hat to Guy Raz too. What an incredible podcast. And I'm so appreciative for those 2 episodes and the couple that he's done with our clients, because it really helps elevate those brands and think about how you can overcome some of these challenges, just like what you guys are doing here on this podcast. So appreciate you too.
He's got such an interesting entrepreneurial story too. Like he started by selling pool tables online. And anyway.
Oh, Davis. Yes.
Yes.
He did. He pooltables.com.br, and then he started a baby company, which actually became 2012's Brazil Startup of the Year. So he's done some amazing things, and it was a selfless act, and an act of his own faith to go into his presidential mission. But that speaks volumes to what the culture he set at Cotopaxi is, that you don't have to be religious, to be part of this community, but that sort of faith-based sort of approach to humanitarian work and the connection to the human sort of experience is absolutely essential.
So cool. And from memory, I think he bought that pool table business back. I think he owns it again now.
Oh, so. It's booming. That's booming. That's a
pool table business booming. Maybe we'll feature that in a future podcast. Jess, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys.